Curious Naked Diatribes. Curious Naked Diatribes.
Curious Naked Diatribes.
Greetings and blessings, and welcome to the inaugural edition of Curious Naked Diatribes. I'm your host, Jason, and I am naked. Now that you're aware that I present no immediate danger to you, I'd like to invite you on an expedition if you like. It's not one for the faint of heart, nor the complacent. Oh no. It's one that will challenge you, shake your very core, and ask you to confront the most ferocious creature that you're ever going to encounter, your own mind. But to tame this fearsome beast, we must first find it in its natural habitat. Follow it, observe it. And to do that, we have many mountains to climb, oceans and deserts to cross. So join me, if you dare, on a journey that's sure to leave you transformed. So what is Curious Naked Diatribes? Curious Naked Diatribes explores such issues as U.S. imperialism, wars, independent media and press freedom, health and wellness, education, work and economics, crime, prisons, and the justice system. Curious Naked Diatribes aims to redefine our notion of what political is through media analysis, thought-provoking commentary, and informative interviews, all with the self-described apolitical person in mind. If you're often saying to yourself, why should I care? There's nothing I can do about it anyway. Then this is your podcast. You may not agree with some of the things I'm going to say on this podcast, but its number one mission is to get you to think. It's not illegal yet. And the one person who tips the scales of justice may just be you. I'd like to start it all off with a quote. It's one that those who know me well are probably tired of hearing by now. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. That's a quote by spiritual leader Jiddu Krishnamurti. And whether you're offended by such a sentiment, or you're nodding your head in agreement, I'd encourage you to learn more about him and check out an episode from my 50/50 series, which I'll link to in the show notes. For me, the profoundly sick society referred to here has always been so-called American society. The American way of life. I found it to be so sick, in fact, that I wanted nothing more than to leave it. And that's exactly what I did in 2014. I spent the next 3 years in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which technically isn't really leaving the U.S., but in many ways, it was and is a life apart. And for me, a much needed and welcome one. One that gave me the opportunity to reflect further on our colonial heritage as I spoke to local Virgin Islanders about their experiences. I began my first podcast there, fumbling and stumbling my way through it. Some of the episodes are painful to listen to now, but for me, they were important. Working on the podcast was a way for me to process through creative endeavor my understanding of who and where I was in the world. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Profoundly sick society. Profoundly sick society. Profoundly sick society. Profoundly sick society. Profoundly sick society. Profoundly sick society.
In 2017, I went on to Guatemala to study Spanish and continue my Elsewhere tour. This was my first time in Central America, my first time being outside the U.S. for an extended period of time. It was so refreshing to see another way of life and start speaking another language. But there is, of course, a paradox here that continues to confound me to this very day. Wrestling with relative privilege and attempting to understand why it is that the place I'm running to is the place so many natives, risking their very lives, are running from. the bizarre physics of empire. But Spain was also once the seat of empire. And I've come to learn that the people of these other Americas, Central America, South America, and let's not exclude the Caribbean, have all had to contend with these waves of colonialism in their struggle for independence, or even existence. This is something I'll be returning to in future episodes. For the time being, at least, I'm back in the US for reasons I'll be expanding on in later episodes. Really, I can sum it up in a word: family. And if you give me two, it's complicated. I met a delightful woman who, as it turns out, was born in Guatemala. We're always having interesting conversations about her place of birth, life in the US, and what the hell life on this ball of mud really means anyway. And once again, I'm adjusting to being maladjusted. I'd like to conclude this inaugural edition of Curious Naked Diatribes with a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who had this to say about being maladjusted. Modern psychology has a word that is probably used more than any other word in psychology. It is the word maladjusted. It is the ringing cry of modern child psychology. Maladjusted. Now, of course, we all want to live the well-adjusted life in order to avoid neurotic and schizophrenic personalities. But as I move toward my conclusion, I would like to say to you today, in a very honest manner, that there are some things in our society and some things in our world for which I'm proud to be maladjusted. And I call upon all men of goodwill to be maladjusted to these things until the good society is realized. I must honestly say to you that I never intend to adjust myself through racial segregation and discrimination. I never intend to adjust myself to religious bigotry. I never intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few, leave millions of God's children smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society. Curious Naked Diatribes is a production of Javi Media. New episodes first and third Tuesdays. You can get in touch through javimedianetwork@gmail.com. Javi Media.